Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Eric Everard. Coach Everard is a seasoned leader with over 25 years of experience in information technology, process improvement, and coaching. He is a certified change leader, Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, Disciplined Agile Scrum Master, and USA Wrestling Gold Coach. Eric has served in key roles with the Colorado Military Health System and the U.S. Army, where he led strategic initiatives, implemented innovative health informatics solutions, and drove organizational change. As the founder of Crywolf Wrestling, he has championed athlete leadership development and pioneered programs to grow female wrestling. His academic credentials include an MBA, MA in Management and Leadership, and a BS in Technical Management, along with specialized certifications in health informatics and agile project management. Eric's unique blend of military discipline, technical expertise, and passion for coaching makes him an influential voice in leadership, sports development, and process transformation. So what on the show, Coach?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem, man. I always feel like I'm really smart or whatever when I write these bios, and then I have to stumble through it and read it. So I'm glad I made it through that with very few complications, but you have quite the career behind you.
Well, thank you. And it is behind me. I retired in March. So my formal retirement date is December 31st.
So now it's just on to coaching for the rest of your life, huh?
In some way, shape, or form, that's always been the goal. That's what I'd rather be doing anyway. I always tell people I'd go to work in my copious free time. So.
I understand that very much. Now you're in Colorado Springs?
I am. Yep. I'm actually north of Colorado Springs now. My wife and I last year, we sold our house in town and moved out to 5 acres. So we're out here with the wildlife.
Colorado Springs is beautiful. I always enjoy going out there, and once a year or whatever, we take a big vacation. It's been going west lately. I think my wife would probably rather go to the beach, but I like the mountains. So
I agree.
And you can escape the Missouri heat. I know people don't probably associate Missouri with heat, but it gets pretty dang hot here.
Humid. That's what kills you.
So. Yeah, pretty humid. So you were leading a military career. You were going through. How did you end up becoming a USA Wrestling Gold Coach? What led you to start down this path?
Wrestling's always been a part of my life. I wasn't a high-level athlete or anything. I was decent in high school, and when I joined the military, you're looking for some way. I just wanted to give back to the community and volunteer. So when I was out at Fort Bragg, I went to a local high school, went to a few practices, as much as I could around the military schedule. And then we went to Germany and ended up in Colorado at the end of that. And we had Fort Carson High School. And I asked my boss one day, I'm like, hey, can I leave a little early to go to practice? And I was in 10 Special Forces group on the support side. And when your work's done, it's big boy rules. So work's done, you can do other things. And he allowed me to go. So a couple times I went there, and in between deployments and training, but I stayed connected all the way throughout. And then when I got out, I was going to school to be a teacher. And when you're in the military and during that time frame, I was deploying, training. You're not around a lot. And when I was around all the time and going to school to be a teacher, I was working on a master's curriculum in instruction. And one day my wife said, don't you have training or a deployment or something to go do? So I hopped online and looked at the closest high school to us and emailed the coach and said, hey, do you want to volunteer coach? So basically my wife kicked me out of the house and said, go do something. You're home too much. And it worked out perfect because I have my hobby and she has her hobbies, and been married for over 26 years. So I think it works.
Apparently it does. She's probably used to, being a military wife and having you gone. All of a sudden you're around all the time. She's like, wait a second, this feels weird. So
Yes.
go coach. Now, where does Colorado wrestling stack up with the rest of the country? I know when we think wrestling, we think Pennsylvania, we think Iowa, into some of those Big Ten country schools. Where does Colorado fall in the grand scheme of things?
Well, Colorado, you have wrestlers on the national stage. We have the Olympic Training Center here. We have the Air Force Academy. They're a regional training center. On a small level, it's not the same level as Pennsylvania or Iowa you mentioned. But having grown up in Wisconsin and been from the Midwest style of wrestling and coming out here, there's a lot of good wrestlers, and there's been wrestlers D1, world teams, everything that goes with that. But I think one thing that offsets is we have to look at the population of students, the population of the state, and we have this big divider in the middle of Colorado called the Rocky Mountains. So traveling and you're cutting stuff in half. And when you compare to states like Pennsylvania, obviously you have a culture in the state of wrestling, or Iowa or California, and many states, New York, New Jersey, it goes all the way around. But I think one thing that Pennsylvania has an advantage of is one, the student population. So I looked up, they have 1.5 to 1.6 million students, where Colorado were around 900,000 students total to work with. And then you add that culture of wrestling out in Pennsylvania versus Colorado, and then the travel and being able to get around and access to things. And then just the geographics, it's just easier to drive and connect with a lot of people in some states over others. And then add in, where do people live? So I think the advantage of like Colorado Springs specifically and Denver, it's only an hour up the road. You have access to a lot of high level athletes who came here, trained here, and they decided to retire here. As an example, I'll call her my assistant coach. We're partners in crime. It's a co-head coach, and it's Whitney Cox, formerly Whitney Condor. She married Jaden Cox. They're world team member. She's five-time world team member. He's world champion, Olympic bronze medalist. So you have access to high level experience and wisdom, the same as the other states. So I think a big thing is geographical and then just your student population. Now you look at some place like Iowa, they're a little bit smaller population in terms of students, but accessibility, and it's another, you have a lot of high level coaches that go there and stay there, and then you're just across the border from Wisconsin and Illinois and Missouri and wherever else you want to go. You're closer to Pennsylvania if you want to go to cancer clinics. So maybe affordability. You could throw Oklahoma in the mix. So I think that's one thing. If you're going to talk Mecca, it's population, geographics, and then just access to resources. And when you have 1.5 million to work with versus half that, I think that makes a difference on your depth. And like California, it's a high population, so they have a lot more to work with. And then throw in the culture of wrestling as a just a historical support. Hopefully that made sense. But
No,
that's
it
my
does. It does make sense. And when we lived out there in Montana, we take it for granted when we live back in the Midwest and this side of the Rocky Mountains that you're not, whatever team you're going to play or wrestle or whatever the case may be, is half hour, 45 minutes. You load up on a bus and you're there. When their guys were in Montana, they were going 2-3 hours to go play a football game or to go wrestle or whatever the case may be, because the towns are so small, the population's dispersed. Colorado's a lot the same way. You've got your big cities, but there's a lot of country areas in Colorado that make up a huge amount of space.
Yeah, and you mentioned Montana. Zadok brothers, they came out of Montana, I believe. You have great high level wrestlers coming out of everywhere. I think it's just the density and the numbers. So Pennsylvania has more people, has more numbers, to get more attention. But you have great wrestlers coming out of every state from somewhere.
And you'd mentioned Jaden Cox. He wrestled at Missouri. I remember when he was wrestling here, and he was a big draw for a lot of the wrestlers around the state to go to Columbia to watch him wrestle.
Right. And for me, being from Wisconsin, Ben Askren's the same age as my younger brother. So I watched him all the way through. We'd go to tournaments and state and everything. And then you're just naturally following him. And then he's definitely a motivating individual, but that's how I got all connected, how we're all interconnected, right? It's only 1 or 2 degrees of separation when it comes to wrestling.
It's amazing when you start getting around coaches like this podcast, how connected everybody is and how everybody knows what's going on. Nothing's a secret. Somebody
Right.
knows.
Within our 1%, right? The other
Yes.
99%. So to us, it's normal and you're connected, but we're actually a small pebble in the pond. It's like military. I think everyone knows military and everyone knows some of the stuff we're going to talk about. But once you get out in the real world and outside of our bubble, then you're like, oh, okay, it's different.
That was what was the hardest when I was young and in construction. It's you act a certain way and that becomes your personality. Well, you can't act like that just in normal public. You can't act like that in Walmart. People don't understand what you're talking about.
Right.
They
Right.
don't understand that it's just a joke, and they take it as that you're just not a nice person. But
Yeah.
that's construction. So
Right. Yeah.
now you're building a culture in Colorado. There was one there. I'm not saying you're, revolutionizing
Oh,
Colorado wrestling. There was a good
right.
culture there, but you're adding to it and you're building up a program, and you've landed on female wrestlers, and that's really taken off for you. And I think as we look across the country, for whatever reason, female wrestling has just taken the country by storm. I didn't realize that many females wanted to wrestle. They open it up, boom, here they come. They not every kid likes basketball, and they want to do a sport in the winter, and there's certain things that drive them. What do you think it is that is driving the female athlete to wrestling?
It's the same thing that drives boys, the challenge, the competition, the um I have a sophomore came out for wrestling this year, never wrestled before in her life, and she just wanted to do something hard, right? Do something that challenges herself, that's different. In our school, it's about 1% that come out for wrestling, and a little bit less than that finish the season a lot of times, but it's not a lot of people. So I just think it's that unique individual looking for that challenge, want to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That whole saying where I just want to do hard things. I want to see what I can do. I want to challenge myself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I don't think the motivators, I don't think it's that much different from boys and girls personally. Yeah, I really don't think it's that much different. So whatever motivates the boys to do it, it's motivating the girls to do it. And when the girls can compete against the girls, because we have decades of what happens when girls compete against boys. We know what comes out of that. So them having their own space, and then they can create their own climate and culture and make it their thing. And just like wrestlers, it's an identity, a badge, or whatever sport you do, football, basketball, you're in that community and that's the badge you wear. This is just another community option for females. So it's, I think it's pretty normal from my perspective, but I've been around the sport for a while, been around female wrestlers for a while, and I've been mentored by some of the best to do it. And I just do what smarter people tell me to do and just try not to mess it up, right?
That's that's all any of us can do wherever we're at. The one thing I've noticed with female wrestling is it's in its infancy, so we haven't maybe caught up with the preparation that some of the boys have. And I think as that develops, we'll see a really good female athlete as it goes on. Because as I've watched now, you've watched way more than I have, but as I've watched, it seems like the injury rate on the females is higher than the males. And I would attribute that to the infancy of the preparation. So I don't know if that makes sense, if I'm seeing it right. How can we improve that, and how can we create more success where we're not seeing some of the injuries that we see?
Well, I think one thing is in training across the board. So how do you get longevity in a sport as physically demanding as any sport, right? Every sport has its custom injuries. The uniqueness of wrestling is, like Joe Rogan says, you're picking people up and beating them with the earth, where it is it's so physically demanding because you have somebody else fighting against you. So football, you have that, what is it, like a 7 to 15 second play, and then you get a rest. 50, where wrestling, you're having these spurts, but even when you're resting, you still have somebody on you for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, depending on what style you're doing. So the female training of things is one, we've been overtraining in the US for wrestling for years. And you see now, and even at college level, they're doing less matches. They're being more intentional with the rest and the recovery, being more intentional with proper strength training and functional training and everything that goes with that. And I'm not a strength and conditioning coach. Again, I just listen to people like yourself and people you've had on your podcast that just listen to people smarter than me. But with females, there is this random number, 10%, 5% difference in training that you have to do. So across the board, make sure we're not overtraining. So when you're going to peak, there's this mentality, old school, which what I grew up in wrestling, where you need to do grind matches and you need to do more, and it needs to be hard just to be hard. When is that helping you get better at the sport? Is that increasing your longevity? Is that allowing your body to recover? but it has to be hard because it's mentally hard, and it's finding that balance where you're building people up and you're empowering, especially the teenagers, and you're not breaking them down and doing more damage than good because you want them to do something hard just because it's hard, right? And then we make up things that are hard. And it's like, well, how is that functionally helping them get better at the sport? And specifics with females. And again, I've been mentored by some of the, like literally Taylor Bacher, or formerly O'Donnell. She was the first Olympian female wrestler in U.S. history. I've had her in the room. She was a quote unquote assistant coach for a season and stayed connected. And the list goes on where you have, hey, this thing called the Q angle, right, for females. And you see more knee pain and they stop running when they start developing in high school. And it's, well, you just need to train. No, male coaches, take a step back. You need to understand the Q angle, and physically there's something happening. So how do you address that? Well, they need to do more posterior chain strength training, for example. They need to do a few different things to strengthen their knees and that part of their body a little bit differently than boys. Boys, you still need to do it, but females just need a little bit more. And then throw in once a month. I know it varies, but they're at a higher risk of injury. So don't push or train through that time period. And then as a male coach, you have to be comfortable going, hey, coach, I'm on my cycle. Okay, you do 10% less, or you don't go live today, or you just help manage them. So I'd rather them do 90% and practice every day instead of do 100%, injure themselves, and then they're out for a month or two, or maybe the season. So I think it's just those evolving with the sport and catching up with science with it's pretty much the same, but you have to account for these minor, they're not minor differences. I don't want to downplay it, but you have to account for that as a male coach. And the way we were coached growing up and the way we managed weight, well, quote unquote, managed weight loosely, it's not healthy. It's not healthy physically, mentally. And then at the end of the day, Cale Sanderson at Penn State, he said, this is just a game. Wrestling's a game. It has emotional and physical consequences, but it's a game. How far you want to go, and when they're done competing, do you want it to be a positive experience, or do you want them to become coaches and referees and contribute back to their community? Or do you want them, when they're done competing, they run from the sport? And there's a lot of people out there that ran from the sport as far as possible and just have this bad experience in their mouth that I think we can do better all the way around. It just, the wisdom and knowledge is out there. We just have to set our ego and pride aside and it's just better to do it that way. So just do that. That whole listen to people smarter than you and just try not to mess it up.
I had a friend whose kid went on a visit here a while back, and they were two high ranked teams, two of the best in the country. The home team was still cutting weight the day of the match. They were, by the time the match started, their kids were shot. And this is one of the higher level coaches or programs in the nation. The visiting team come in, they were chill, they were laid back. They'd already made their cuts at whatever facility they were at. When they rolled in, they were just about having fun. They were about playing some games, jacking around. There was no stress on them to get that last half pound, to get the, well, you can only imagine what happened on the mat. You can't compete with a team like that. I mean, you can if your athletes are just that much better, but when you start getting into the upper level where the athletes are the same, it's very hard to compete when your kids are so dang tired from cutting weight all day. And you watch a team walk in and they're just ready to play games, play cards, whatever it is they do. That's mentally defeating on top of being physically defeating. And somehow we have to figure that out.
Well, and tactically, I'm not a weight cutting team. We'll manage weight in a healthy way, and you can take your time and work into it. But there's some studies out there. University of Nebraska, I was introduced to it. Their dietitian actually ended up coming to the Olympic Training Center. So I've had several interactions with her. And the basic science, if you lose more than 4% of your body weight within 6 days of competition, it's basically physically impossible to peak. You may win, you may do well, but are you wrestling to your potential or competing to your potential? So the impact of hydration on the body, and then, and this is my theory, but a developing teenage brain that's dehydrated and add in some weak neck strength in there, and they're highly susceptible to concussions. So if you have some neck strength and you're hydrated, and there's that physical safety. And then just from a competition standpoint, you may be better than me, but if you're cutting weight, you're going to be tired come the second, third period. And I just need to hang with you to the third period. I may be losing by 10 points, but what is it? Exhaustion makes cowards of us all. So, and that's something you can't control. If you're dehydrated and malnourished, and then you're trying to do this sport, you're trying to win it in the first period. Well, maybe I can hang onto your arm for that first period, and now it's a whole different experience for you. And that's if you feel good and your conditioning is a little lax, or you're even wrestling up a weight class, but you feel good. Feeling good makes up for a lot of feeling good allows you to hope, right? So I think that's the mindset thing that I think a lot of coaches are overlooking. Of well, you need to be as small as possible because the theory is you have more muscle. Well, if you're cutting that much weight, you're eating into your muscle or you're dehydrated. So I don't see how either one of those are going to help you be your best self. And then that's also where people run from the sport, or they keep their kids out of the sport because who wants their kids not eating and you know making unhealthy choices. So, and on that note, I'll share real quick. I tell them drink 1 ounce of water per body weight. If they're a little under that, it's about staying hydrated. But and we're at Colorado, so altitude plus wrestling, about 1 ounce of water per body weight. Try not to eat anything out of a bag or a box. That drops your sodium. And then stay away from added sugar. That's it, because you get rid of the added sugar, or at least reduce it, because teenagers live off sugar, right? Don't drink your calories, orange juice, all that kind of stuff. But if you reduce that sugar and you reduce that sodium, and then you're drinking enough water, that alone helps to release inflammation. That's going to be, some kids 5, 10 pounds just because they've been living off sugar and packaged and processed food for 9 months, and you come into season and they do that for about a month, and like, man, I just feel good. I'm sleeping better. I'm going to the bathroom better. I'm like, yeah, you feel good. Well, now we can do a hard thing, you know?
Yeah, I think we were lied to about sugar. I think sugar is one of the most powerful drugs out there, and nobody is willing to sit back and acknowledge that that's what it is. But if you think about, like, we had a lot of wrestlers that they would maybe eat some carbs in the morning and then they would go keto all day, and that way when they woke up, their brain would get going, but then they'd stay keto all day, and coming off the sugar was the hardest thing. It's like
Oh, yeah.
it's like trying to quit chewing or trying to quit smoking. If you don't have that mindset to come off sugar, you can't. It'll eat you alive.
Right. And I tell them, switch over, because your body, carbs are carbs, sugar, but added sugar, I think it just processes different. But I tell them, add more vegetables for the energy. Now, is that a diet Mountain Dew? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
I know
I
I'm sitting right here too.
I drink
Perfect.
way too many of them. Way
Yeah,
too
we
many.
just became best friends. All right. I digress. But
Well, hold on. Don't
yeah,
digress yet. We'll go completely off script, and then we'll catch up
yeah.
to where you are. So
Okay.
I always ask Diet Mountain Dew drinkers, and if anybody's out there listening, you can rank them. People don't understand. If you're ranking the best flavor, where do you get it from? Like, my list is the 1 liters are the best, the 20 ounces are the next, and then it's like almost size excluding 2 liter. I don't think 2 liters is good when you go to a glass with it. So I think 1 liter, 20 ounce, and then you go to the 16 nines. Then then maybe the 2 liter, and then cans. How do you rank them?
I go with what's available, and it's funny because the parents know. I used to be regular Mountain Dew, but they know again, trying to cut out that sugar. And I know it's not good for me, but whatever they bring me is what tastes good at a wrestling tournament, to be honest. And when I was working, I only had soda outside the house. So now that I'm retired, I'm like, oh, it's in the house, and it's better when it's not. But I'll quit one day. I did quit a couple years back. So during the pandemic, I quit completely, all caffeine.
When I was coaching softball, I had one dad that would always make sure he had Diet Mountain Dew for me in case I needed it, and a can of Skull in case I needed it. But
Oh,
I've
mine's
come up,
peanut butter cups.
yeah, I've come off the Skull and been trying the Ons. I'm down to a low milligram. One of these days, I'll totally get off it altogether. But the other thing with Diet Mountain Dew, if you drink a lot of it, have you noticed that there's different undertones. Like not every batch is the same. So you'll get one that maybe tastes a little pineapple. You'll get one that tastes a little cotton candy ish. Yeah, it's like what's
Well,
that bottle going to taste like?
and I think it's part of what you're eating along with it too. I think it'll change. It's unique to that. Like I can't drink Coke or Pepsi or anything too syrupy. It's just, but for whatever reason, I don't know. This one's caught my soul.
I agree with that 100%. So back to the podcast, we were
Yeah.
talking about we were talking about sugar being a drug. I think it's very, and like you said, carbs are a sugar, but I don't think that's as addictive as the added sugar, as the white sugar is.
Right. And that's why I focus on the added sugar, and it allows them to just practice some discipline and don't drink your calories and just stick with water. And if you're feeling an energy, you know, carrots or strawberries or berries, something berry is a good thing just to start with. And it's easy. They can remember it. I need to drink an ounce of water per body weight. I need to try not to eat anything out of a bag or a box, and then stay away. Just start monitoring added sugar. And that alone, it's something I found that teenagers can do, adults can do. And it makes a whole day. You just feel better. You don't have to do a lot. And that's the thing. We all know what we're supposed to do, right? The information and knowledge and wisdom is out there. It's just how do you do it, right? So whether that's internal or external, that's individual, but we just got to figure that out for ourselves. And I don't make fun. I do. I got a weird sense of humor, especially with the military. But people will complain or have a thing. I'm like, well, it's choices. And I make fun of Wit because they have twins, and she'll come in. Oh, the twins did this. I'm like, you chose to make them. That was intentional. So it's just control what you can control and own it. And if you don't want to do it, then don't complain about it. I don't know. It's just black and white in my head as far as it comes to that. So
Well, in this process, working with Wrestling, I've heard you talk about a lot of different leadership things that go along with that. Yes, coaching, the wrestling part of it is a must. We all understand that. But the backside of it is where I'm seeing the biggest change here. I had some athletes that were driven to be state champions. That was their goal. They were heading that direction. Those guys went through. Well, the classes behind them are kind of hanging on to those coattails, and they don't want to do the processes that got those guys there. So in saying that, you're very big on leadership and developing leaders so that your program doesn't go up and down, and you're waiting on a leader to emerge. You're creating them through the process. How have you been able to get teenage leader development and make that work for your program where there are no highs and lows? It's always steady.
you're still you're still going to have highs and lows because one year you might have one wrestler who came all the way through and earned the title of team captain as an example, and then other years you might have five or seven. So you have that ebb and flow where the climate changes a little bit if you have one team captain versus five sharing the role. But the whole thing is they have to volunteer for it. They have to do the three course progression, and it follows military. We're not making good little soldiers, but it's if you want a teenager to be in a role to lead, which is reinforcing the culture, reinforcing the climate, speaking up in the locker room when there's no coaches or adults around, or at a party, or when they're out and about, where they go, hey, let's take a pause or take a breath, or is this who we are, or whatever the conversations are. So how do we give them the tools to be able to do that? And where we were for years, it's the coaches would pick, or you'd have a team vote, or we've tried it all. How do you pick your team captains, or how do they evolve? If the team votes, is it a popularity contest? And when we just decided to go, we're just going to give them the opportunity, and we'll talk about leadership tools, the basic tools that have worked for me. And I did the masters, I did the healthcare and everything. But the leadership we're talking about is what are those things that work when you're scared, when that true fear, because you have that wrestler who's confident in practice, but they're not courageous in competition. How do you get them to transfer that? That's that fear block. Um, how do you get somebody to speak up to their peers? Well, how do you help them to overcome that fear of speaking up or doing the right thing when nobody's watching? You have to give them the tools. The military does it. Here's the tools. Now go lead. Here's the tools. Now go be a team captain. But a lot of times we just throw a teenager in there, and how many adults don't know how to lead, or everyone thinks they know, but there's a lot to it. And are you a leader? Are you a coach? Are you a teacher? Are you a mentor? Those all have different roles and different skill set to do that. So to manage that ebb and flow, to sort of keep it somewhat static where they carry on the culture, they reinforce the culture, because something a lot of people don't like to accept, we don't control the culture. You can impact the climate immediately. If you raise your voice in practice, you're immediately changing the climate, as an example, or you put in a new rule or standard or whatever. But culture is what is carried on and passed on after years. So it's 5 to 7 year process. And then you find yourself with a culture of, well, what happened? Because what the teenagers were passing on is not what you wanted them to pass on, or the semantics or the vocabulary. It's not, you're not aligned, you're not in sync. And then you coach for a couple of years and you're like, well, this isn't going where I want to go with it. And that's where I think the average coaching lifespan is four seasons. So 3.3 and a quarter years is 4 seasons from start of your first season to the end of the last. So if it takes 5 to 7 years to set a culture, but most coaches are quitting in 4 years because they start with that freshman class and follow them through, right? Well, I'll see the freshman class through the class I started with, and then I need to go do something else or whatever the case may be. You have to get to that 7th year just to start seeing it, or at least the 5th year, just to start seeing a consistent effort. So the leadership, what that gave us is that foundation of, let's do these 3 things and do these steps in these orders. And let's talk about courage and bravery and heroism and integrity and, accountability and all those things that you want to do. And we just narrow it down, going, we're just going to talk about these characteristics, and we're going to teach these characteristics, and we're going to relate it to our program of what we want to be. But that's just your left and right sidewalks. They're on the road, they're driving, they're out there going, and you're just trying to get them to go in the direction you want to go. And if they're up on the sidewalk, sometimes you can't drive on the sidewalk and get them back on the road, or maybe they need to take that exit. So here's an exit up here. It's not aligned, and we're not going to sacrifice the culture of the program, because it's not about the coach. It's not even about individuals. It's about you. We have 51 kids in our program right now. Well, if you have one that just doesn't want to align, that's going to do terrible damage down the road, because it's undermining your credibility. It's undermining the coach, and you're trying to do that balance. And what I found by providing the tools to the teenagers, good tools that actually work for me in combat zones, like when 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who I was responsible for are truly scared, and then bringing that into coaching where they're truly scared before they go into competition. And it's all relative. It's still the same feeling, same emotions. Yep, it's not an explosion or something life or death, but it's still, they got high anxiety and high stress and everything, all those emotions that go with it. How do you provide them the tools when they're stressed? They can take a breath and reinforce the culture before they have that emotional breakdown, which is also helping them with their emotional regulation that I think teenagers now have struggled with, because when they go somewhere, everything's structured. You have a coach, you have everything set up. It's not like, I was listening to a podcast recently back in the day where you just got friends together, rode your bikes down to the field, and you were the referee. You made up the rules. You resolve the conflict, which might be a little scuffle in between the game, and then you get back to the game, because the game and the culture was more important than your individual challenges. So I know it's a little long-winded to say the leadership program gave us that foundation to be consistent year after year with our climate, because that's what evolves into the culture, and accepting the fact I don't control the culture. I can influence it through the teenagers, but am I giving them the tools to take it in the direction that I hope it to go? And sitting here, I started at Vista Ridge in 2016, and I started coaching at the prior high school I told you about earlier in 2005. So taking those lessons learned from one high school into the next. And now we're sitting here, going on a decade later. And the culture I have on our girls team is really something. It, I'm surprised it worked, but yet I'm not, if that makes sense. So I know these steps, I know these things, I know it works. I've literally replicated this on 3 continents while in the military. And then to put it in the program and be like, man, I hope it works out. You just have to stay consistent with it. And the thing that makes it work is giving the teenagers the tools that make sense for where they are in their brain development and that addresses what their struggles are today. I think that's the secret to stay consistent and not have those ups and downs because they reinforce it. It's not coach or it's like a parent telling their kid what to do and what not to do. And then they talk to a coach and they come home and they tell their parents, hey, coach said. And the parents, I've been telling you that your entire life, but however you hear it, cool. It hit home on that. Did I answer that, or did I go too far off on the theory of things?
No, it's fine. You can go any which way you want. I don't control it that much. I like what you were saying. I've not heard many people go down that avenue before of, you know, I do believe what you're saying is accurate. You only have so much influence in culture because the minute you walk out of that room, if those kids hate you, they're going to drive culture the opposite way. You can make them do whatever you want them to do in practice. You know what I mean? You can make them run, you can make them do whatever, but the minute you walk out of that room is when culture's developed.
Yeah, that's what culture is, right? It's what they carry on. So I think in accepting that, a lot of people, you want to control everything and you just don't have control over a lot of things in life, right? You think you do, but you don't. So,
And I think that's where we're misleading maybe kids is we've given anxiety so much power because we act like you can control everything. Well, we couldn't control anything when we were young either. We just didn't call it anxiety. We just called it being a little scared, but you still had to face it. Now all of a sudden we're using anxiety as a crutch and these kids are not getting out and seeing what the whole world has to offer because we've bubbled them with this idea that they have anxiety. How do we overcome that?
it's funny you bring that up. One of my favorite things to do, especially at tournaments, especially the beginning of the season, like their first match in high school or their first match ever. And I'll do this with the middle schoolers a little bit more gently, but they'll be, coach, I'm scared. I'm nervous. Well, can describe what that feels like. And they go through and describe, butterflies, however they describe it. I'm like, all right, do me a favor. Describe what excitement feels like. What's the difference? And it always leads to that. And they're like, it's just reframing, going, anxiety is a natural human emotion. That's what kept us alive and alert. And well, feeling wise, if you're anxious or you're excited, truly, what's the difference? And people, well, anxious is it? Well, you're just labeling it negative. It's your adrenaline dump, your break out in sweat or whatever the case may be. And again, I was fortunate to be support in special operations, but you get access to high level training. And on top of that, my first NCO, when I first got to the 82nd Airborne Division as a private, when I got to 10th Group as a staff sergeant, he was a Green Beret, 18 Bravo. So I had connection and access, maybe a little bit more than the average support, maybe. I don't know, where he'd come up, hey, Eric, let's go do this. And I'd look at my boss, I'm like, can I go? And yeah, get out of here. But one of the biggest things is I got to do this training one time where there was a lot of focus on breathing. So they're doing tactical stuff and you learning stuff and fumbling through. And I was the mascot, so I got made fun of a lot, but it was worth it because of the breathing aspect. When you have that adrenaline dump, an explosion goes off, or the difference between a round coming near you or at you, I mean, everything zeroes in. And breathing and how do you work through that so you keep moving because you can't freeze in those moments. That's the worst time to just freeze. You have to move. You have to take action. You have to, what is it, OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act within a breath. And that was one of the biggest things where it's reframing that emotion, going, hey, you're having this you're having this emotional reaction. How can you properly frame it so you respond to it? How do you just reframe it, relabel it? And you kind of trick yourself going, well, that's normal. This is happening. I need to operate. It feels like I'm moving slow. I need to push through that. And you just train, get used to that feeling. And that's why, like I said, one of my favorite things, because they're scared, they're nervous. They go on the mat. We can't help them. It's just them and one other person in the arena, and figure it out, you know. And they're wearing earmuffs, so we yell at them and they don't hear anything. So I coach less. I figure I coached for the 5 days before. They just go out there, perform, put on a show, and I just need to encourage and empower them the best I can. And that's one of the biggest things. How do you reframe anxiety, like you said? 100%, because it leads to the emotional regulation that so many struggle with also. They don't know, they don't recognize the emotion, or they don't know how to handle or respond to it instead of react to it. And then throw in the brain development thing, and they're disadvantaged anyway as a teenager.
The conspiracy theorist in me believes that we've given anxiety power for a reason.
100%.
It
Yeah.
keeps people indoors. Like, if we wouldn't be a country if anxiety had overridden those guys in 1760 when they decided that
Right.
this is where we're going to go.
Yep.
Nowadays, you can throw a little influence at somebody and get them scared to leave their house. So somehow we have to find that middle ground where we can still be explorers, we can still drive change, we can still move the needle, and be okay with the consequences that come with that. I mean, we're in a way safer world now than we were 200 years ago.
Oh,
But
100%.
yet we won't push the needle. I don't know how to help kids overcome that sometimes, but I think it's being pushed on them almost purposefully.
It's something I share with the parents quite a bit and with the coaches. We have to allow them to struggle. I think that's something that's missed, where we want to keep them safe and not repeat the mistakes. And but that's also what made us as a functioning adult, is having struggled, and allow them to struggle safely, not suffer, right? There is a difference. If you're in the military, you'll suffer, but struggle, I think you have to create an environment that allows for the struggle, because if it's not a little bit scary, not a little bit of anxiety, not a little bit of struggle, then they're not, you're preventing them from developing that courage. And when we talk about leadership, I believe courage is the single most important thing in leadership, because courage allows all those other characteristics we talk about to exist. It allows you, you have to have the courage to be humble. Humility is one of the most important things as well, but you have to have the courage to be humble, to in front of other people, and whatever the case may be. So I agree 100% that one way to help combat the anxiety is reframe it, and then put them in situations that allow them to struggle. And that's what I love about wrestling, because they can't be helped. In the team sports, you can justify and rationalize, or you have somebody on your left and right. And then in the individual sports, swimming, tennis, yeah, you're out there by yourself, but you don't have somebody trying to tackle you as you're trying to get to the tennis ball, or trying to drown you as you're swimming, which that's what wrestling is. And it adds that level of anxiety that is healthy and safe struggle. That, yeah, that's why I'm drawn to the people I surround myself with in a sport like this, because yeah, that's what's helped me to persevere and be resilient all the way through. I turned 50 this past year, so I feel like I'm getting old. And then you start, well, I got more years behind me than in front of me, right? So what's really important, and when things get hard and when nobody's there, did you give your child the tools? Did we give the kids we coach the tools to take a breath and don't quit in that moment? Don't quit today. Quit tomorrow, because you're going to get some sleep. It'll be a completely different day tomorrow. As a Jocko Willink talks about that. Don't quit today, quit tomorrow.
And that works. There's been plenty of times I've been ready to quit something and I'm like, okay, I'll quit tomorrow. And then you show up and yeah, you manage to fight through. And then before too long, that's all behind you. And you've gained progress and you enjoy what you're doing. And you're glad that you didn't quit on a momentary decision.
Right.
Now, through your program, you have a leadership council. I know we've talked about leadership a little bit, but we almost talked about it like individually or as a full culture. But creating a council that can help dictate some of the decisions that are getting made, giving a say to the athletes so it's not an empirical wizard telling everybody what they're going to do. How do you go about building that where the leadership council does have the right ideas in mind and they do fix the things they can fix and they don't take on battles that are never going to work?
Well, it goes back to giving them that class. So here's our standard leadership course. So one, as a coach, define what success looks like. What is your definition of success? Is it transactional, titles, awards, whatever, or is it a transformational? Every coach is competitive. It's just what avenue do you go to accomplish that? I've chosen to do the leadership, the transformational aspect, and we still get the outcomes on the other side, those transactional stuff. But define your success. Who are we? What are our values? Where are we going? What what are the goals for the season? What are your individual? What are the team goals? And overarching, like for our program, is I believe wrestling can be free. I think there's an avenue to be free for the families, right? There's costs and everything, but how can we make it free? Because athletic fees keep going up every year, and then you have all the training and the camps and the travel, and it gets expensive. And I think that contributes to the anxiety that's being put on the kids where they feel like they have to perform more, maybe. But defining success, give them the tools, so have them go through the course, and then only do one big change a year. So you're not going to change everything all at once, but what's that one thing? So like our boys team this year, they're focusing on accountability. So all the coaches are in line. We are going to hold people accountable for attending, for being present. That's it. That's the first climate change, and they're just going to repeat that. And the next year, it might be more about participation, or it might be more about communities, whatever, wherever you go with that. But I think that's the three steps of you have what is your vision, what's success, what are we working towards, and then give them the tools to be able to help you do that. So like a coach, it's about the individual. I'm helping you get to where you want to or need to go. You have goals, you have that, and I'm going to coach you to be able to get there. Leadership is I'm going to do some coaching, but I'm trying to inspire you to go where I want to go, where I want the program to be. Um, you're here for a 4 year cycle. I've had, I don't even know how many, a dozen 4 year cycles of kids. So you're, you're important, you're contributing, but you're here for 4 years. I've been doing this for over 2 decades. You're going to come and go, and parents, once their kids are out of the program, you don't hear from them a lot anymore. But while they're there, they're real involved and impactful. Having the wrestlers part of leaving a legacy and leaving it better than they found it, not worse than they found it. So, what's your definition of success? Give them the tools to do it, and then just do one big change a year. So they're part of four things a year, and the leadership council they come up with what that thing is. So we do a team culture project every year. So what's something you want to change or impact? We have a girls tournament every year. The first pack leader council, they were part of defining what that looked like, what kind of medals, singlets, awards, you know, how big do we make it? What's the setup? Or our team captain, they design the singlet for the next year is part of it. So I'll give them a left and right limit. We have to stay in the school colors and use the school logo, but from there, and then would I have done it different than I want a different singlet? Probably, but they have ownership in that. Having them the first 30 minutes of our practice, it's pack leader led. They do the warm ups. We gave them, hey, this is what we want to do, and we want to break a sweat by this point and accomplish this, but they lead it and own it. So you're creating these opportunities for them to lead. Wrestling tournaments, you have a lot of downtime. So, hey, we're going to do this game and you're going to lead it, and you're coordinating uh, the cooler so they have healthy food. So you're communicating with your team. So it's all about communicating, coordinating, and getting people, inspiring people to follow what you ask them to do. And I think that's the big difference why we have to give them that leadership skill set, because it is different than the coaching skill set because of what the outcome is. Is it individual, or is it what you want to have after all those kids leave? And I had three of them come back. So three of them in college wrestling right now. All three of them were in the room the other day. And all right, you get up front and you share your wisdom with the team. And I don't introduce them. I don't stand up there. I'm not hovering. I sat in the back and just recorded. they outside the eyesight. So little things like that where you're putting them on the stage and empowering them, and then you made a decision. Now we got to live with it. So, and not just little things like it'll impact the season, and now we have to live with it. You set that precedence. That's what we're doing the rest of the year.
Now, what mistakes have you learned during this process of building teams and programs and culture? What are some things that you really stick out in your mind that hey, if I don't do this, this is going to happen and this is going to be catastrophic?
Patience and consistency, where the athletes who are in your program, they're important. The parents who are in your program, they're essential to support the program, but they can add to it, but not take away. They can contribute to leaving it better than they found it, but not leaving it better, leaving it, leave it better than you found it. Don't leave it worse than you found it. You'll have some, and I'm sure every coach that listens to this, you'll have parents who want to come in and change it because their child is the most important thing. Rightfully so. Yes, your child is the most important thing to you. But we have 50 other kids in the program. What's important to them? Well, you can't do 51 individual things and try to make everyone happy. So this is the definition of success. These are the standards that help us get there. These are the sidewalks we're going to operate within. Now, in there, as long as we're heading in that direction, but we're not stalling out and we're not going backwards. So, as a coach, you have to know what that is, right? And I'm sure every coach, there's teams out there that you can just see how they act and what they do. And it's a reflection of the culture that the coach at least allowed to occur. It may be a direct reflection of their character, of the coach's character and what they allowed to occur. But if you have a team that is just rude and, disrespectful, that's their culture. That's what's reflected in that. So when you're defining what your success is, when you take a step back and you look at your reputation or you talk to other coaches or parents, how do you see us? What's our reputation? Because that's a direct reflection of my character. And if I don't like our team and reputation, well, I allowed that to happen. That's part of accepting the head coach role, right? The assistant coaches, they don't, the responsibility is on the head coach. You allowed this to happen. Is it a reflection of your character? Is it a reflection of your values? And if it's not, you need to protect that at all costs. Reputation, you don't have control over it, but it is a reflection of your character. So if you're not protecting your character, well, that's a reflection of it in itself, right? So I think that's the biggest lesson is having the conviction to go, okay. And it comes with experience where you get to an age where you're like, yeah, this is who I am. This is who I want to be. This is the way it is. And these are the values and the standards that are going to support us moving in that direction. And if you don't want to be a part of it, I looked up last night. We have, I think, 7 high schools within 10 miles of our high school. There's a program out there that aligns with your values as a parent, your values as the wrestler. Maybe our values and our culture doesn't align with yours, and that's okay. One's not better than the other. Find a program that aligns with your values and go. I wish you the best. But in our program, this is who we're going to be.
You mentioned it in there, and I almost think it's freeing when you finally figure out who you are. And while we think sometimes we know who we are, it takes a lot of self-reflection to figure out, like, okay, I was doing that because I was expected to do that, not because that was what I was. So when you reach that aha moment, yes, it definitely defines a true direction that you can take a program.
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to reach it earlier. Um, Having been in the military for a while and then deploying in a leadership role and having the mentorship and then all the experiences that come with that. Um, During the pandemic, I had a stroke. So you have these experiences where you self-reflect on what's really important. How do I want to spend today? Because the afternoon might not be guaranteed, let alone tomorrow. So you start self-reflecting or, man, that was close and you're back in your hoot sitting by yourself. And it's like, why am I here? What am I doing? What is this for? Type of thing. So I've been blessed to have those experiences in my 20s, and then 30s, make the mistakes, and then 40s, start figuring things out and have some significant life events. And then now you're in your 50s. It's like, yeah, I have a pretty good idea who I am or who I want to be and what stories I want told of me or hoped are told of me later. And did I have impact, a positive impact? I had breakfast recently with a good friend. I coach his daughter, coaching his son now, and he's firefighter, paramedic, Marine, special operations, did all the secret squirrel stuff at the highest level. And we are talking about coaching and his kids. And he goes, if you're not empowering me, if you are not empowering my kid, I don't want you around my child. There's no, you are there to empower them, which has me thinking, going, well, a lot of coaches, they'll discipline or, well, you hold them accountable, but do you have to discipline? And how you go about doing that? Are you doing it for them or for yourself? You know, are you empowering them? Are you using these as learning opportunities and keep it in perspective that they may look like an adult, but they're still a teenager and they are in high school. They're a decade away from having your brain development. But I think we forget that as an adult a lot of times.
No, and I was making a note of that right now because you're hitting on a very good point. Empowered athletes threaten mentally weak coaches, and I see it all the time. And I see it almost being like an attack on athletes that are trying to come into their own and come into their empowerment. If you don't have the right coach in place, it's almost their job to break them back down to almost an elementary level because that it's very threatening to have an athlete that can think for themselves.
Well, right. And I'm doing a leadership program. Like I was talking to one of our coaches who's like, I got a lot going on. He has his own business. Do I really have to do the leadership course? I'm like, do you want wrestlers, teenagers on the team that know leadership better than you? Is that threatening to your ego? Is that um, it's about control, right? I think a lot of the coaches, or just people in general, they want to control. If it's out of control, well, how do I control it? It's reflection of your ego. And you'll get into this where they'll get boisterous and say really confident things that are just wrong. But because they was boisterous and confident, everyone's like, oh, they must be a leader because that looks like confidence and they're saying stuff and it must be right. But it's all about do what I say and controlling the narrative and controlling the environment about. And they're trying to control the culture. And you'll see that a lot in club sports because they can control the culture. So you apply, you pay this. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're out, go somewhere else, or you can't go somewhere else. Well, is that empowering? Are we developing leaders? Are we developing people to replace us and not just replace us, but do it better than we did it? Like I joke, I try to fire myself every year from coaching females because I want to have a female head coach that has it and but a female head coach who's going to stay there for 5 to 7 years to build a program and hopefully stay longer, not a year and leave and a season and leave. And so how do you balance that as well? So yeah, I think you hit on the spot there that control ego and with the leadership program, we're gonna have conversations. I'm gonna give them tools and I'm gonna say this, and they will call me out. And that's part of leadership. I'm like, you need to hold me accountable. And a lot of people are not comfortable doing that. But again, referring back to that military and not just general military experience, not to downplay anything, it's all honorable. But being in the 82nd and jumping out of airplanes, there's just different levels of fear and courage being developed. And then volunteering and being part of special forces and special operations and being around Navy SEALs and Green Berets and seeing how they operate and supporting them directly and getting the wisdom from them of there's a lot of ego, but at the same time, there's a lot of humility because life and death matters. They have to operate in sync because there's real consequences, right? And then on a lower level coaching, if if you're threatened by a teenager being developing their courage and confidence, well, what are you coaching for? Isn't that what we're trying? Isn't that the outcome? We want them to be courageous and confident and go on and lead other people, right? And coach other people or change the world. How are you empowering their potential? So we talk about it, right? but then they don't want to take the risk and do that because they're threatened by it, as you said. So, mm,
And we've lived this a little bit in our lives, but if it takes your athlete a whole year to get mentally right to do the sport all over again, something's wrong. If they're so torn down after 3 months, where's the line? And I understand in a lot of states, you get what you pay for, and working at a school doesn't pay as much, or working at a comp team doesn't pay as much as Walmart does. So your pool to pick is very limited, but I watch it every year, and I just like, you can just see, well, they talk about Bobby Knight. He would win a lot, but at the end, his players quit. They were tired of getting beat up, and they just stopped working for him. And I see that so often at different places I go, and it's like, is it worth it? Is it worth to subject your kid to that? For what reason? Did it build resilience, or did it beat them down where it's going to take even longer to dig out of this hole?
yeah. And is it that cycle of violence where that's how they learn and you think it's normal? In our leadership course, there's this, it's called the three attitudes. It's three chairs. I forget her, Dr. Catherine Gordon, I think, but she talks about the three personalities. So you have your blind, your confidence, and your disguised attitude. And the confident, that's your leader. Your blind, that tends to be like timid, gets bullied. And then your disguised, that's your bully, your dictator, all the negative narcissism, everything that goes off in there. And that disguise is always trying to push everyone down in that blind, trying to push the confident down into the blind. So it's all about control, and how do you control and influence others to create that unhealthy environment. And I think, unfortunately, maybe coaching is one of those things that attracts that type of person that wants control, because they set the practice, they do this and everything. And it's up to the parents to break that cycle and not go, well, that's how I coach. That's what my coach did. Well, take a step back. Are we evolving with the sport? Is that the right thing? Just because we've always done it. In England, they chase a cheese ball down the hill every year. Nobody knows why they do it. And they break legs and get injuries and go to the hospitals every year. And they do it because they've always done it. Are we doing things because we always done it, because we think we know, or do we actually know what the right thing to do is? And that's where the education and the training and communicating, being transparent with everything, go, this is what the current research says. I don't know if she was a rugby coach or a soccer college coach. I had heard her on a podcast. Don't remember who it is, but she said her definition of success is how many significant life events she gets invited to after her athletes have left the program. That's a good measure for me, going, well, what am I being involved with? Are they coming back? Did you have a positive, healthy impact where they want to come back and pay it forward to that next group of athletes? I think that's a good measure. And however, if you're in that disguised attitude and your ego's in the way, they just can't see it. They don't know. They just can't process that, right? So they will never learn. The people who need to learn don't take extra education. The people who need to learn will never come on a podcast like this, and which talk about anxiety. I'm living it right now. So,
Man, there ain't no reason to do that. It's a chill area.
yeah.
We don't get too far down those rabbit holes to feel anxious, man. I
No, but you're
appreciate you
putting
coming
yourself
on.
out there, right? You're
You are,
being
yes.
vulnerable, and it's out there forever. And man, I hope I didn't use the wrong word or offend someone, but it's not the intent. But the whole point is, the people who need to evolve, who need the education, they will never seek it out and they won't take it. So then it's up to the parents and the administration and other coaches. Don't allow them around your program. Don't take them there. Move your child.
So there's a few things you said in there, and I've told my wife this for years. I go to a bunch of graduations. I get a lot of graduation invites to kids, and we go. And when you watch, those seniors get to pick who hands them their diplomas in a lot of schools. Some schools you don't. This is who hands it to you, and this is how it goes. But in a lot of these smaller schools, you get to pick what teacher essentially impacted you the most. And I really think if you started basing end of the year reviews on how many diplomas you give out and raises according to how many diplomas you give out, I think that might really change the way people look at some of this stuff. Like, if you've coached kids for 4 years and not one of them asked you to hand out a diploma to them, were you impactful?
Right.
And the English teacher's giving out all these diplomas. Well, in most situations, kids aren't diehard English kids. They're diehard sports kids. But the coach didn't give out any diplomas, and the English teacher gave out 10. So I think we've got this a little backwards.
On that note, something we do with the girls I do, they get to choose who's in their corner. So you can have two coaches in the corner. Who do you want in your corner? And it's around where you look over who's going to calm you down or give you that confidence boost, or who can you hear? Maybe the octave of the voice isn't there. And the one rule I said is you can pick whoever, you're not hurt my feelings. But if you're in the state finals, I'm in one of those chairs. You can pick the second person, and that's the only scenario. But otherwise, we have wrestlers on the team. I do all their freestyle, we do the travel. I'm seeing them for months outside of season, but during season, they want these two coaches in their corner. Good. That it doesn't hurt my feelings to do that. Where a lot of coaches are like, well, I'm the coach, I'm sitting there. Are you helping? And using that as a metric, also going, okay, who are you being impactful? Who are you helping when they're out there in the struggle, like for real, and they look over the corner and they're in a bad situation and they're looking for something, some sort of hope or encouragement or something, and they look at you and your face is all red and you're yelling. They don't want that person in the corner. So, and every athlete needs something a little bit different. And I'm blessed with seven coaches for 14 girls on the team. So have your pick of who you want there. I agree that you measure it that way. Who's coming back to your program, who's keeping in touch, who's sending you a funny meme out of the blue. Hey, coach, remember when? I have a wrestler where the whole reason we call it Crywolf Wrestling, he's like, hey, he's living in Arizona, but he was back in town. He's up about a half hour north. He's like, hey, let's get together for lunch. He's 25 years old. And it's not like we've been in big touch, but that's the definition of success for me when they reach out. Or I have a wrestler, prior wrestler. He was in Japan. He was back in the States for 6 days, going over to Europe, and he's the officer in charge of pararescue, a combat rescue officer. So he does the cool guy stuff in the Air Force. He's home for 6 days. Hey, coach, I'm going to be home for just this week. If we can get together for dinner or lunch, something, I'd like to connect with you. Sure. Well, the whole point was he came home, he got married, and he wanted to introduce me to his wife. That'll get you emotional.
That's very true. And we have kids that go on, they leave the gym, they go on and get real jobs. And it's great. A lot of those kids, it must have been impactful because around Christmas or whatever, they'll text me, hey, what does the gym need for Christmas? They're willing to spend their own money to further what the gym did for them for other kids. And you just don't always get that in a scenario. So like you said, sometimes people, when they're done, they're gone. You'll never see them again. And maybe you didn't reach that kid. Maybe your style didn't work for them, and that's okay. But
Yep.
Other kids, they realize the value they got, and they try to keep a good thing going because they recognize what it did for them.
Yeah. Do you want to have a program that the kids you taught want to bring their kids, right? They want to bring their kids back to the program, or they want to keep it going so it's available for when their kids are old enough. I think that's more meaningful, impactful, planting those trees that you'll never get to enjoy the shade of, right?
That's the whole thing. I think all of life, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. I think we're probably less smart than they were when they built the pyramids, but for whatever reason, we think we're geniuses. Well, we couldn't build the pyramids now. It's an ever evolving development of knowledge. And then at some point, we're just riding out what other people did for us.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions. I kept you on here a while, but I think these two questions,
good conversation.
That's what it's been really enjoyable, but I think these two questions might take a little bit to expound on, so I want to make sure I give you time. But I've heard it from other coaches, and I've watched it, that the female wrestler and the singlet and all that keeps girls from wrestling. but they have a lot of voices in their ears. What strategies have you found to help a girl overcome girls aren't supposed to wrestle? You got to wear that singlet. You know, whatever the case may be, these outside bombardments to try to dissuade them from doing something like wrestling. What strategies have you found that help the athlete overcome some of this?
Well, one, having the leadership council existing because they welcome the wrestlers, they explain things to them, and that expands into the parents in the stands because this year we're adding in where the parents will go through also. And I met with a couple of parents the other night, and they were talking how the parents in the stands mentor and coach other parents as they show, hey, this is what's going on. This is how we sit. Make sure you get a chair because these bleachers get hard. So you have that built in where they're helping make them feel comfortable and then also give an option. So you can have fight shorts and a compression shirt. My experience, they wear the fight short and compression shirt once, one tournament, and then they're like, the singlet's more comfortable. Having female cut singlets, and that's where, again, having the leadership council team captain, you design the singlets. We've tried these different brands. Which one do you like? And we'll go with that brand that you like. And things like in the singlet having period guard. Didn't know that was a thing, but they add in the female singlet for that, and having higher cut shoulders and or armpits and neck. Just creating those options that they have to be comfortable. And then I think the biggest thing is the the building the leaders and giving them the tools to be welcoming where they're the confident. They're welcoming the kids and saying, hey, this is how it works and it's going to be hard, and framing it in their voice and having prior athletes. Like I said, the three that are in college, they all were back in the room. They're sharing their wisdom and putting them on the stage to just reinforce and maybe bring up things that I wouldn't think of, especially as a male coach who's wrestled many, many years ago. And then on top of that, I'm intentional with having female coaches around the program. So I have two wrestlers coaching with me that I've coached. I coached them both, they're females, through high school. They're now back coaching, volunteering for me, with me. Having Wit in the room, that high level, older athlete who did it and reached the highest levels of the sport, sharing her wisdom. So you have coaches who are closer to their age, female coaches closer to their age, kind of in the middle. And then I'm kind of conducting, just trying, like I said, not mess it up and stay out of the way, but addressing when we talk about empowering them and have them leave healthy from your sport, talking about nutrition, talking about recovery, talking about female specific lifts to address certain things that they have. Yeah. And just talking about it all the time. We do mindset Mondays and forgiveness Fridays. So and sometimes it's spread out on a Tuesday or Wednesday, but it's like 15 minutes a day where I'll play a TED talk, motivational TED talk that applies to setting goals or whatever, just exposing them to as much of that mindset. I don't want to say female specific because it's beneficial to boys as well, but having female coaches so they can see themselves where they could be or go. It provides validation for me when they see my prior athletes come back and help coach. And then they have that connection because they're telling stories about Coach Eric. And some of them are funny, some of them are not, but they're the truth. And then having that balance. I have two parents that help coach with me where I coach their daughters. And I'm about to coach, both their daughters are in eighth grade. So I'm about to coach their youngest ones are coming up. So help in middle school. So they know me and then they're coming up next year. So I have parents who are coaching, who coached or wrestled, or I have one parent, he never wrestled. And his role is you're our EQ guy. You're our emotional. You're keeping me in check. I coached his son, I coached his daughter, but we deployed together in 2003. I trust that dude. And with that relationship, he's pulling me off to the side, be like, you need to check yourself, or that was wrong, or this was the impact. So I have that constant mentoring check as well. So surrounding myself and the athletes with as many resources and access to people who look like them, sound like them in 10 years, in 20 years. I think that's extremely important, whether you're male, female, whatever your background is, having somebody around the program that you can relate to, because I can't be everything for everyone, right? So complement your weaknesses with other people's strengths. So I try to do that. And I think that's worked where they want to be a part, they want to be a part of it, and they're joining the culture of, well, we wear singlets. I don't force anyone. We have other options, but they don't even ask for it because that's the culture they set. And they all wear the same singlet for duels. Tournaments, you get to choose. So we have these three, four. Wear the one that's comfortable. We wear t-shirts in practice, full cut, no V-necks. In competition, we're not walking around with our straps down on our singlet with the sports bra. They reinforce that. So they put on a good image for themselves and the sport to represent it appropriately, I think.
I'm going to hit you with this last one, and I
Okay.
don't want you to feel like you're sabotaged. So if you don't want to go into this, we will edit it out. But
I'm good.
okay, but this is what I've learned. I have a military guys work for me, and I'll lay out the scenario, and this is what I
Okay.
learned really quickly. I had a bunch of wrestlers in the gym, and so I was going to a lot of wrestling matches. I was cooking, doing all those things. I didn't know the kid, but they had a younger athlete. And I think you're seeing it more and more. You're hearing about it more and more, athletes struggling mentally and taking their own life. So while we were at the wrestling, the younger kid who I knew who he was, but no relationship with him, had killed himself. Them other athletes, you've got to try to get them on the mat and get them to wrestle. This is districts. It's not like a duel. It's not like you can just walk away. I mean, like, we need to get you focused, get you on the mat. This is your chance at state. Yes, this is very important over here, but we can't do anything about it at this moment. I got back to work, and one of my guys seen a lot of combat. He's seen some stuff overseas, and the conversation come up, and it was obvious very quick. He kind of counseled me through that, because the training was so high for veterans on what to
Yep.
watch for, what you can control, what you can't. Unfortunately, with everything you've done, you probably know about it, or you've been trained to do it. What does the average person not know about athletes' mental health, that we can step in and help before something gets so far out of whack that there's nothing we can do?
One is, like I mentioned, we do Mindset Mondays and Forgiveness Fridays. We do journaling, those motivational TED Talks or podcasts. I think the most important thing is to model the vulnerability, that it's okay to not know the answer. It's okay to, and when I say vulnerability, it doesn't have to be an emotional tear crying type of thing. Vulnerability is just being honest. So if you're talking to the wrestlers and they ask a question you don't know, hey, I don't know, but let's figure it out together, or let's find the answer, or reminding coaches and parents when they call me and say, hey, my child is struggling. Well, also reminding them, going, well, we're not health professionals. Have you looked at going to a therapist or getting professional help, or instead of trying to fix it yourself? So a lot of times we want to fix it, we want to solve it, or we just want to take it away, where maybe you don't have the skill set to be able to help in that and doing what's best for the child and whatever that looks for you. Having not just the military, and back when I was coming through, I think they still use it, but it's the Ace of Hearts, and it's ACE is an acronym. And the first thing, if a child or anyone's in crisis, is you make sure they're not alone, and then you escort them. I forget what it is off the top of my head, but you have these in crisis. You have these steps. Make sure they're not alone. Get them help. Escort them there. Just and don't downplay it. And we have, at least in Colorado, if you do say sport training through USA Wrestling, or you do the coaching education, they talk about mental health. We have to do a mental health thing. So the information is there, but then in the moment, don't downplay it. Don't just discredit it or set it to the side. Just take a moment and go, hey, I'd like to talk more about this. We can't get into it now, but you're not alone. hey, let's go do this. And I tell the kids, if you come to me, I'm going to involve your parents. And a lot of them are scared of that. But if you have that relationship before, and again, that foundation of the leadership course, the whole point of that, it gives me more interaction time with the people who choose to take advantage of that opportunity. They volunteer to do it. You build more respect, you build more trust. And then when they say something to you, lots of times it'll just be an offhand or a comment or, you know, just take a pause and recognize that they're sharing something with you, you know. And I think that's where it starts. Just recognize that if they're saying words to you, and a lot of times it'll come through in a text because the in-person communication that you could argue some struggle, some don't, but don't be dismissive to it. And how hard is it to just recognize that you heard them? You shared something. I heard you. I recognize it. Let's talk more about it. And when it comes to mental health and everything that goes with that, I had a situation years ago, and if any wrestling coach does the teal course for USA Wrestling, I'm in there and I talk about the subject because I had a wrestler reach out basically saying bye. But if they're reaching out, that's a call for help. You know, okay, need to connect you with an adult because I'm not there. I violated Say Sport every which way from Sunday. But then the next day I followed up with USA Wrestling and Say Sport and said, hey, this is what happened. This is what I did. What resources does USA Wrestling have for us? And we don't. They so we have all this coaching, but are you providing the tools? Which goes back to we're going to put a teenager in a leadership role, but we're not going to give them the tools to do it. Well, you're going to put a coach in this role, and the coach has to be not just the technique and tactics and nutrition and strength and conditioning and sports psychology and mental health. And lots of times the coaches, they're not trained, you're not prepared for this. And like I shared with USA Wrestling, going, if I wasn't in the military and worked in healthcare for when I started in healthcare, 2005. So you have 20 years in healthcare, you have the military. I've been exposed with training, and that's one thing military and government does great is we get a lot of training, a lot of training, a lot of tools that I can, well, let me do this. And when I got the phone call, I'm like, okay, ACE card. Let me go online, pull up ACE card on my phone. Okay, I do the A, I do the C, I do the E, and do the, okay, get your mom on the phone. Is anyone else in the house? You know, just using that as a checklist type of thing, but just being aware of that tool. And that tool works. I think I said earlier, we know what to do. I mean, the information is available, the knowledge and wisdom's available, but what to do. And the first thing is, if you're going to coach and you're going to be around teenagers and you have this in your program, then you need to get that training. You need to be aware of those things and have that tool set available. I've had several wrestlers, unfortunately, epilepsy. Well, with combat and I can give an IV and blood and trauma, I'm I'm comfortable. But the medical things, it was we have wrestlers with POTS and having seizures and epilepsy, and like I wasn't comfortable with the medical. So I went and did an EMT course. It was 4 months. And then I passed the National Registry for EMT and I was registered EMT. I didn't do it to be a firefighter or to even be an EMT or ride on the amp. I just did it for just the knowledge because there's a weakness where I wasn't comfortable and your athletic trainer's not there all the time. And in the moment, they're looking at you and there's a medical emergency. What do you do? What don't you do? You know, we had a eighth grader, their kneecap had popped out to the side. And I was going out there, and the first thing, you evaluate the situation. I'm looking, I see her kneecap. Another coach came up, said, oh, your leg, and started grabbing the leg, like to straighten it out. I'm like, stop. Knowing what to do in that moment of you're going to do more damage. And then you look at dad, who's a firefighter paramedic, different one than I mentioned before, similar background. He comes out, he puts the kneecap back into place, and we're moving on. But just in that moment, what are you going to say or not say? Whether it's coaching, leading, training, or mental health, in that moment, what I'd recommend to anyone who watches this, look up that ACE card. That's a place to start. Have it saved on your phone. And if somebody says or shares something with you, start there. It's an easy reference. Um, and recognize you're not their therapist, you're not their psychologist, you're not their mental health. Your role is to stabilize and transport, like EMT. We're not the doctor. We're not trying to fix anything. You're just trying to get them to a higher level of care, a better level of care. And I always remind the teenagers, if you're struggling, like who you pick in your corner doesn't have to be me, but if you're struggling, involve an adult as soon as possible because teenagers helping teenagers, you're at least a decade off of having just the capacity to be able to help. And it's not nothing against you. You think you know, you don't know. Involve an adult that you trust as early as possible. And so, yeah, that's a hard one. And I think that comes with the vulnerability and setting ego aside too. You know, that when you're in a sport where you got to be mentally tough and just figure it out, or oh, it's not that bad, you know, where you downplay are you is it empathy or sympathy? Right? Sympathy is, oh, it's fine, you know, or what about this? Or you start giving solutions or justifications, where empathy, you just sit with them. Maybe you don't say anything. Joke with my wife, she'll come home and have a challenge or a complaint or a problem. And there's been times where I go, am I listening or am I solving? Because a lot of times we want to solve things, right? Especially, I don't want to categorize the male brain, but we want to solve things. We want to help. And well, just do this. Sometimes they just want to complain. They just want to talk, get it out, and you just sit there and listen and go, okay. And then it's done. You didn't have to fix anything. Just because we could doesn't mean we should.
And that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you taking time going down that road. Nobody wants to talk about it, and that's part of the problem. We're not
Well,
outrunning it.
in the military, though, I think and being in healthcare and being part of that culture change of how do you how do you remove that stigmatism, that not stigmatism, that stigma from talking about it, from getting help. And like in behavioral health, I did a lot of work with that because I was on the technology side. How do we give them the capability for telehealth? So a soldier doesn't want to be seen walking into the behavioral health building. Well, telehealth can get them connected, and then you can get them to come into the building for in-person care if they need it. But in the initial, there was a lot of pushback for telehealth care because no, they need to come in person. That's so important, and the intake and this and that. I get it, but that soldier, there's a stigma around it that it's weak or whatever. So really, the military, and you still have it, but I think you see a lot of veterans out there, especially in the podcasts and where they're talking about mental health and talking about the importance and talking about the stigma and how unhealthy that was and how it could have been better. Where and then having years of deploying and everything. Where I think the military is good within the military, like the brothers and sisters you served with, where we talk a lot. You run into your buddy, it's hugs and I love yous and miss you and all that kind of stuff. But it's in that community. It's like they don't put it out. Where now you start seeing people putting that out and helping to remove that stigma. I think is critical to talk about it. And I mean, what's the alternative? I'm going to protect my ego, or I'm going to be the big confident person and look how strong I am. Well, meanwhile, they're struggling. And maybe if they saw you be a little bit vulnerable, maybe that's the difference. And there's all kinds of stories out there. I forget where I saw it, but literally this one kid, he was on his way to go kill himself. He had a plan and everything. And I don't know if it was the quarterback or the football and had made a comment or sat next to him at lunch or something like that. And he decided not to kill himself. And they're still friends to this day. So you don't know what a kind word or just listening could do to start, and then modeling that behavior. And again, I'm not in my program talking about suicide and suicide awareness and mental, but just incorporating tools. So here's tools to be resilient, right? And if you have that resilience, my analogy, jumping out of an airplane the first time is really scary. I You have to have an act of courage and you have to do it. I can encourage you, but you have to jump from the plane. But we just don't put you in the door and say jump. You do training and you do preparation. So when you're in the door, you believe in your ability to recover. You believe in your resilience. Like, okay, I'm going to do this. And if this goes wrong, I do that. If this goes wrong, I'm going to do that. If it all goes wrong, I'm probably going to pass out before I hit the ground. It'll be fine. Right. You accept that risk. But after you do it the first time, well, now it's brave because courage, fear is present. But once you're trained and everything, and the absence of fear or the spontaneity of it, well, now you're in the brave category. And then when you do it for somebody else, it's being heroic. So this idea of modeling the development of your courage and your bravery, modeling your ability to talk about, I'm kind of drifting here, but to bring it back, modeling that it's okay to talk about this and modeling what the tools are out there. And if we provide the tools of resiliency, of journaling, talking, involving an adult, sleeping, eating healthy, giving them those tools to be resilient in life. So when they have that moment of struggle, they take a breath and they involve an adult. And that adult is smart enough to recognize it and involve higher level care as needed, where that adult understands the resources that's available that the teenager can't see or is unaware of, or that adult can't see or is unaware of. Can you escort them to where they need to be and just be that person available for them? Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate that because it's not something I've got into very deep on the podcast before, but it's definitely been something that I think needs to be talked about, even if it doesn't escalate to uh, that situation. You're going to deal with athletes on a daily basis that are somewhere in between being okay and not being okay. And maybe you, by knowing the athlete, can tip the scale back to your favor just by understanding some of these things.
Yeah. Maybe they need a 10% less day. Because again, I'd rather you train every day or consistently for a long period of time than get injured and be out temporarily or permanently, right? So keep it in perspective of why we're really here as coaches.
Well, it was kind of a deep question to end on, but I've had you on here for about 2 hours, so it's
Oh,
been great. We covered a lot of stuff that I really didn't have notes on, and that's how I enjoy it. And we got to talk about some really deep stuff, so I appreciate all of your time.
no, I appreciate you, Stephen. Thank you for having me, and hopefully it was valuable for you and valuable for anyone who watches it.
I think so. I really enjoyed it, and at the end of the day, I'm the one I have to be happy with, and hopefully it goes further than that. But this one I've really enjoyed, and I'm happy with.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. So hopefully, yeah, I appreciate you.
I appreciate it, Coach, and you have a great holiday season.
You do the same. Happy New Year too.